Welcome to DOJ Online Services Deceased Estate Application Demonstration. In this video you will learn how to easily complete and submit a deceased estate application to the Department of Justice back office for processing. To access the DOJ Online Services platform, you need to be a registered user with valid and verified credentials. Enter your email address or username that you registered with, as well as your password to log in to the DOJ Online Services platform. Once you've captured your email address and password, please click on the login button and you will be redirected to the landing page. On the landing page you will have a view of all the services that you can complete an application for. The profile speaks to what you are going to be transacting as when you are making an application. Let's have a quick recap on the different types of profiles and what they represent. An individual user is you transacting on your personal capacity. An entity is you transacting as a representative of an organization or a company. A service provider is you transacting as a representative of a law firm as a legal practitioner. For this demonstration, we will be transacting as a service provider. To transact as a legal practitioner, you can simply click on the checkbox for the service provider for you to switch your profile to the service provider role. You will be prompted with a confirmation about switching your profile. Click on the Yes button to proceed with the switching of profile. Once the profile has been switched to your service provider profile, a confirmation message will be displayed indicating that your request to switch to service provider profile has been successfully processed. Simply click on Continue to start transacting as a service provider. To complete a deceased estate application, simply expand the Masters of the High Court Services menu item and select Deceased Estate. Once you have clicked on the deceased estate, you will be redirected to your deceased estate case history page, where you have a view of all the cases that you submitted or completed using the profile that you are transacting on. To register an application, simply click on the hyperlink Register a new death notice/application. A confirmation notification will be displayed indicating that you are transacting on your service provider profile. Do you wish to continue? Simply click on Yes to proceed. Next you will be prompted with a questionnaire that just gives you a view of the required information that will help in fast-tracking the application process for the submission. You can indicate that all of the information that is required is available by simply clicking on the radio buttons and click on the Accept button to proceed. The deceased estate application process then gives you a breakdown of different information that correspond to different sections of the application that is required for submission. These are represented as different tabs in a wizard view. Let's have a look at each tab. The Deceased Details tab talks to the information around the deceased that you are making the application for. The Applicant information talks to the next of kin, or the relative of the deceased, or the person that is requesting this deceased estate application. Next of kin details, as the name implies, is all of the deceased's next of kin relations, from the spouse to the children or other parties. The assets and liabilities gives you the ability to capture all the assets and liabilities for the deceased. The Executor information is the information around the person that is executing the deceased application. This could be the applicant, it could be the next of kin, or it could be a representative of an organization depending on your deceased application. Supporting Documents tab provides the facility for you to download, print, sign and upload supporting documents that must be accompanied with your deceased application for successful processing. Let us start with capturing the information. On the deceased detail, you will notice a couple of things. Number 1, you will notice a red asterisk next to each control indicates that they are mandatory. And labels on the form itself gives you information around what type of information should be captured for a successful deceased application. Capture the ID number of the deceased. Please note this ID number needs to be the ID number as per the Department of Home Affairs. So, the ID number needs to correspond with the ID number in the deceased's green book or the deceased's smart ID card. The full names and the surname needs to correspond with the information registered on the deceased's green book or smart ID card. Capture the full names and surnames. You need to then capture the place of birth of the deceased, as well as the population group and occupation where applicable. You do notice that there is no red asterisk next to the population group and occupation, which signifies that these are not mandatory fields. You must indicate the marital status of the deceased, as well as the marriage type if the deceased was married, and the place where the deceased was married. You need to indicate the date of death of the deceased. This cannot be a future date, must be a date in the past and must correspond with the date on the death notice. Select yes or no if there is a will available. If you select yes, you will be prompted to capture the will information. If you select no, you do not need to capture the will information. I am going to select yes for the purposes of the demonstration. You then need to indicate if the will is a joint will or not. Simply click on the Add Will button to add the will information that is available for the deceased. Indicate the status of the will which is pending, the number of pages of the will, and the date the will was signed. Please note that the date will signed cannot be after the deceased date of death. Once you've captured all the information, simply click on Add to continue. As indicated, the date will signed cannot be after the deceased date of death. Let's correct that date and click on Add to continue. Once you click on the Add button, the information is added to the table, where you can edit using the edit icon or delete using the delete icon. You will be prompted to indicate that the will you have added is a must will or not. If you select yes, you will be prompted to add the must party. If no is selected, you will not need to capture the must party information. Lastly, on the Deceased Details tab, you will be requested to add the residential address that must be the residential address 12 months prior to the deceased death. This information is critical for the jurisdiction of the deceased application. Click on Add Address and select Residential Address Type. You need to capture the residential address line 1, representing the street address or complex address. The residential address line 2 talks to the suburbs. Select the applicable province where the deceased resides, then the city, which is filtered based on the province selected. Once the city has been selected, a notification will appear highlighting the master's office where this application will be dealt with, and displays the master office for future correspondence. Simply complete the Add Residential Address by selecting the postal code and click on Add. Once you've added the address information, the captured information will be displayed in the table grid where you can edit or delete by clicking on the icons under Manage. Click on the linked master office that will be handling your application due to the residential address that has been captured. Once all of this information has been captured, you can easily click on the Next button and you will be navigated to the Applicant Information tab. In this tab, you will be required to capture the information of the person requesting the application to be processed. You need to capture the identity number of the applicant, the full names and the surname. The information captured in the full names and the surnames must correspond with the Department of Home Affairs database. Enter the ID number, the full names and surnames of the applicant identification document. You need to indicate if the applicant was a signatory present at death. If the answer is yes, you need to indicate the method of notice. If the answer is no, you need to indicate if the signatory identified the deceased. Easily select on yes or no if the signatory identified the deceased. You need to indicate the method of notice, if this was a court order or a death notice. If you select a court order on presumption of death, you need to indicate what court was this order granted in and date that it was captured. If you indicate that the method of notice was a death certificate, you can then proceed to select the signatory relationship with deceased. This here indicates what is the relationship of the applicant with the deceased. You can then indicate the applicant's preferred method of communication. This is also important because this is how the correspondence is going to work if the applicant is the executor of the estate. Next, you need to add the applicant's residential address, where you capture the details similar to how you capture the deceased residential address details, by indicating the address line 1 and 2 where applicable. Easily select the province, then the city. Once added, the information is added to the table where you have the option to either edit or delete the information captured by simply clicking on the edit or delete icons. If the applicant is also the executor of the estate, you need to then indicate yes on the question, is executor. If yes is selected, this then pre-populates the applicant's information into the executor table for you to update on the executor information tab. Once you are happy with all the information on the tab, simply click on Next to continue. Kindly note each time you navigate by clicking on Next to the next tab, the system automatically saves the previous tab's information. Upon clicking on the Next button, and you are not able to proceed, scroll to the top of the page to check that there are no validation errors on the screen itself. The validation error message I have it the ID number, you then need to correct the ID number that has been captured because the ID number needs to correspond with the Department of Home Affairs database. I will just verify all the information that has been captured and simply click on the Next button to proceed. You will then be redirected to the Next of Kin tab where you can then capture the spouse, the children, or the children descendants, or the parents' details as the next of kins to the deceased. Each of these have a specific category, so the first category is the spouse's category, so the spouse of the deceased. The next category is the child of the deceased, the next category is the deceased children descendants, so the children of the deceased children. The next category is the spouse's children, the parents' details, and finally the other party details. You will notice that there is a drop-down next to each of these categories which allows you to easily classify the next of kin details. To capture the next of kin details, you need to select the drop-down first of each category and click on the button next to the drop-down. Once you select the Add button next to the drop-down, a secondary view will be displayed where you are prompted to capture the personal details as well as contact details for the next of kin. For the identity type, you can select either an RSA identity number, a passport, or an old RSA identity number. As per the standard for the online services portal, it needs to be a valid identity number corresponding to the Department of Home Affairs database. I can then capture the full names and surnames, again as per the Department of Home Affairs database. I then need to indicate the life status of the person if they are deceased or alive. If they are deceased, I have an option to capture the estate that was registered, which will be a list of all the master's offices where deceased applications are processed. I can indicate the date of death, the estate number and the master office name. Please note that all these fields are not mandatory as they do not display the red asterisk signifying mandatory fields. You can then capture the address information for the next of kin by capturing the address lines in the same format as you captured the applicant and deceased address details. Simply select the province, city, postal code and then click on Add. You also have to indicate to advise if this next of kin that is being added is nominated to also be an executor of the estate. You can click on Yes if they are or No if they are not. Simply click on the Add button to add the next of kin details, which will then be populated into the next of kin grid against the category selected. Once it is added, it will scroll to the added information in the applicable table grid. Again, you have the ability to edit or delete the information by simply clicking on the Edit or Delete icons. You can capture multiple next of kins based on the different categories that exist. You can capture a child next of kin details, you can capture the spouse children next of kin details, you can capture the parents details, and/or the other party details. Other parties will be relations like your uncle, your aunt, your grandfather, your grandmother, half-brother, or your half-sister of the deceased. Simply click on Next to proceed to the Assets and Liabilities tab. On this tab you capture all of the assets and the liabilities for the deceased. You are prompted to capture the estimated estate value, as well as a breakdown of all the different assets that exist for the deceased. Here you can capture information around the properties that the deceased may have had, the immovable assets representing properties, or movable assets representing cars, etc., or any other investments that the deceased had. So you are prompted to capture all the information, as this has a bearing on the deceased estate application. So I will capture 2 assets by capturing all the information. As you can see, the asterisk next to each control indicating it is mandatory information. For the value, you need to capture and confirm that value again to ensure you don't make a mistake when capturing the value of the estate. You can capture multiple types of assets that will be added to the estimated estate value. You can also add the associated liabilities for the deceased by capturing the institution, the value of the liability, as well as confirming the value. The liabilities also allows you to capture multiple entries of liabilities for the deceased. With both the assets and liabilities that have been added, you have the ability to edit or delete the information by simply clicking on the Edit or Delete icon next to the assets or liabilities in the associated grids. Once you are happy with all the information that is captured, you can easily click again on the Next button, where you will be redirected to the Executor Information tab. This is where you capture who is executing the estate. The information is pre-populated here because on the Applicant Information tab, we had indicated that the applicant is the executor. You will need to indicate if the executor is ready for appointment. If you select No, you will need to provide the reason for not appointing. If they are ready for the appointment, then you can simply select Yes. Because the applicant is also the executor of the estate, their details have been pre-populated in the Executor Details table below. You need to edit the details. You can click on the Edit icon, where you will then be prompted to complete information on the executor details. Notice the items that are highlighted indicates that these are mandatory fields that have to be completed before you can proceed. The first thing you need to capture is the application category. If the applicant is the executor, you need to indicate that the applicant is the executor. If the applicant is represented by an agent, typically the applicant wants to hand over to an agent to help them administer the application. You need to indicate they are represented by an agent. If the application is being executed by an organization or a trust or a nominee of that organization or a trust, you will select Nominee of Organization or Trust. Select the appropriate application category. In this case, because the applicant is an executor, the selection will be Applicant is Executor. There needs to be an indication if the applicant is exempted from providing a security bond. If yes is selected, then you need to select which grounds you were exempted. Alternatively, if no is selected, the security amount is then pre-populated from the estimated estate value. This security amount cannot be updated as it is pre-populated from the estimated estate value on the Assets and Liabilities tab. On the Executor Details, the personal information is auto-populated from the Applicant tab. You need to indicate the preferred method of communication. You can indicate the master box number if you have access to it. The organization name and organization number is only required to be captured when the application category selected is a nominee of an organization or trust. This application is not the case because the applicant is the executor. You will then be prompted to indicate if the executor is renouncing. This scenario is if the executor is represented by an agent or a correspondent. If they are represented by an agent, you need to indicate that they are renouncing. And is applicant represented by agent is yes. If they are not renouncing, just indicate by simply checking no, and if they are not represented by an agent, simply check no. You also need to indicate that this executor is the primary executor or not. If they are, select yes. If they are not, select no. In this case, I am selecting yes. Then, because the preferred method of communication is email, I need to add a contact email to proceed. Capture the valid email address and simply click on Add to proceed. To complete the executor details, you need to add the postal address by clicking on Add Address. Select postal address as the address type and capture the information similar to the other tabs on this deceased application. Click on Add to add the postal address. There is not requirement to add the correspondence summary or agent summary details because the executor is not renouncing and the executor is not represented by an agent. You will only need to capture that information if the executor is represented by an agent or is renouncing. Simply click on the Update button to save the information captured. If you are not able to proceed, scroll to the top to view any validation messages that are displayed. The validation message that has been triggered is signatory to death notice, also the executor. Simply select yes or no and then update the executor information details. This information is then added onto the grid where you have the option to either edit or delete the information by select the edit or delete icon in the grid. You have the ability to select multiple executors for the deceased application by simply clicking on the Add Executor Details. To proceed, simply click on Next button. You will then be prompted to the Supporting Document tabs and an alert notification will be displayed indicating all the required documentation based on the information that you have captured on the deceased estate. Some of these are structured documents, which are documents that will be auto-populated based on the information captured and can be downloaded, signed, and uploaded back into the solution prior to submission. Simply click on the Continue button, and you will notice the structured documents that could be required for the application. To get a reminder of the documents that are required, click on the Submit button and you will receive the same notification when landing on the Supporting Document tab. So you've got the J190, the J294, and the J243 for this application. So let's go and download those documents. The J294, the J243, as well as the J190. So when you click on the download buttons, you will notice that the documents automatically downloaded onto your computer. You can easily click on the downloaded documents to see the contents of the information that were downloaded. You will notice that the documents are pre-populated with all of the information that was captured for your convenience, and an indication on the document will show where you need to print, sign and re-upload back onto the solution. Ensure that all of the documents that you have downloaded are printed, signed and uploaded. To add supporting documents to your application, easily click on the Add Document and click on the Choose Files for you to choose the files to upload. The Choose File button will open your File Explorer on your computer or laptop where you can select where those files reside that you've downloaded or stored. The solution also provides you with the ability to select multiple documents/files residing in a specific location by left-clicking and holding the Control button to select multiple documents. Once you've selected all of them, you click on OK. All these documents will be added to the grid where you then need to select the category of the document type. For the J190, you need to scroll to find the J190 type. For the J243, follow the same by scrolling and selecting the category type of the document. Then the J294 by scrolling and selecting the J294 document type. So you will perform these steps until you have uploaded all of the documents that are required before you can proceed. To always check which documents are still outstanding, you can simply click on Submit button for a prompt of the outstanding required documents still to be added. So we need to attach the death certificate, the deceased ID, the applicant ID, the next of kin ID for spouse/wife, the marriage certificate and a copy of the will. So we will now add all those documents by selecting Choose Files again and uploading all those documents to the application, and perform the same steps until we have all of our documents added. We need the deceased ID, and then I will select multiple documents so that we can proceed. We then need to categorize our documents by selecting the corresponding document type, and then add them to our documentation pack as our supporting documents. Only for the next of kin ID or passport will you be prompted to capture the relationship to the deceased for that next of kin document. Because we captured the next of kin spouse details, we need to indicate that the relationship is the spouse and wife of the deceased. I am going to classify the remaining documents as the will and the death certificate. We click on the Add button and continue with these steps until all of our required documents are downloaded, signed, where applicable, and uploaded. We click on the Submit button to verify if there are any remaining supporting documents to be added. In this case, it is the marriage certificate that still needs to be added. Simply click on Continue and add the marriage certificate, the same process as the previous documents that were added. Finally, click on Add, and now all the documents that have been added appear in the supporting document grid. And now we can click on Submit to submit our application. On submission, you are prompted with a disclaimer for you to read thoroughly and click on Accept to continue with the submission of your application. Lastly, a confirmation notification will appear, prompting you if you would like to continue with the submission of your application. Simply select Yes to continue, and your application gets submitted. Once that application has been processed, you will be presented with your unique reference number, URN, that you will be utilized for all future correspondence relating to this application and that your application has been submitted successfully. You are then redirected to the deceased estate landing page where the case information is displayed in the registered applications grid. You can easily look for updates on your case by simply clicking on the hyperlink of the application status, where you will get a view of the history of the application and where it is within the application process. That brings us to the end of this deceased estate application. In this demonstration, you have learned how to complete and submit a deceased application as a legal practitioner and submit the application to the back office.